certainly have had your aha moments as a result of being involved in farming. In a very unique way, each of you are a presence on the table in the homes of everyone who's here in lots of different ways. If you could be at their table with them, what would you want them to discuss? What would you want them to talk to their children about in relation to you and understanding farming?
Almost a year and a half ago, it was January 1st, and I was thinking, well, you know, I've been kind of self-involved my whole life, and I really want to kind of see what I can do to contribute. You know, I do a lot of griping, my fair share of griping on how things aren't right, and how things ought to be, and how things ought not to be, and so on and so forth. But, so I decided, and I just happened to get an email from GMO Free CT. And it was just an email blast. And I said, well, that's maybe something. This stuff is, you know, that's worthy of a fight. So maybe this year that's what I'm going to do. I'm gonna take this on. And so I went to a meeting in Glastonbury in some library and just sat in, and I listened to the speakers, the GMO Free CT speakers, and I was looking around in the audience, and I thought, wow, this is bad. It's good that people are here, but it's bad. We've got a long way to go, because it's almost like, is this really it? This is the presence. This is who's on my side, you know, and I don't mean that in a condescending way. I was like, how the hell are we gonna do this? How could we move this forward? How could we press this issue forward? And so I really just kind of delved into, that was kind of my segue into the industrial food system and probing and learning and researching, and it's been so revelatory, and there's so many facets, and I think it really boils down to, when I'm trying to answer your question. I'm sorry, it's a tough question, but we're definitely at a precipice, surely, you know, with our food system and the way that things are grown, the way the distribution system, on down the line. But there's so much that we have to understand, and we have to educate ourselves, and we have to arm ourselves with in order to even really begin to take this on anywhere beyond ourselves and our own actions, which I definitely encourage everybody. You know, you can do amazing things just by, you know, making your own food choices, not stopping at Dunkin' Donuts. I'm sorry, if you got stock in Dunkin' Donuts, I unapologetically tell you that I'm not going to patronize them, because I think that they're a problem. And you know, these big franchises in the food system, and you know, you have to start with yourself, clearly, and that's going to have a big effect. But then, if you want to take it a step further, and you want to see, you know, how else can we get traction, you really have to educate yourself. And in this trek, it's been like a year and a half of this really focusing on all this. I really put my heart and soul into it. I just realized that there are so many systems, and that there's no quick fix. There just simply isn't. There just simply isn't. And there's a lot of fears that I think, like I was asking her, you know, there's a question about GMO foods. Are they unsafe? Well, you know, if you arm yourself with science, and you understand that a sugar molecule, oxygen, hydrogen, carbon, it's a refined, highly refined sugar molecule. If you were to take that molecule, it's in my hand, it'd be the same a billion miles away. Same exact thing, whether it was made with a genetically engineered process or not. So, no, that sugar molecule, I'm going to put all cards on and say it's safe. It's just as safe as the other sugar molecule, which is equally as bad. But, as Bill says, it's not about that necessarily. The biggest problem with GMOs and this kind of thing in the industrial food system is how they've co-opted all of the control and all of the decision-making processes and all that's involved in growing genetically engineered crops, the pollution and so on and so forth. So it'd be a long discussion at that time. I'd be there all night.
That's a good answer. I think it would be fun to take some time with the food that's on your plates and think about where it came from and some of the story behind it, and to try to get in touch with the wonder of natural systems and how this food arrives at your plate, and share some kind of tradition, formal or not, of giving thanks for the food.
I think it goes back to education and talking about where the food comes from and how that food is developed. And it isn't just the young people. I bought my first 7 cows from a farmer who was in his, I guess, he was in his mid-60s at the time. And he dropped them off in just about this time of the year and said, so what are you going to feed them? And grass was growing well. I said, well, grass. Well, how much corn are you going to give them? I wasn't planning on giving them any corn. And the guy was like, I think I'd given him the check, but I think he might have wanted to give back his cows back on the trailer. He agreed to come by and check out about a month or so later, and he came by a month or so later, and I said, boy, they're looking pretty good. What did you feed them? I just fed them grass. And this guy could not understand that cows could grow just by feeding them grass and maybe hay in the winter. And that's because in his paradigm, for the 45 years that he had been in business, he had been schooled to feed cows grain. And he didn't understand that 80,000 years of evolution actually produced a very efficient animal taking grass and producing meat with it.
Well, my table is a 14-month-old, so we can't get too deep in conversations, but I'm sensitive to the fact that everybody's going to have a learned opinion, contrarian often to what I perhaps think, and I try to keep, agriculturally speaking, I try to keep the conversation limited to what we're all going to have a collective, recognized experience with. I mean, we could start talking about biochem and the eyes would just glaze over. And yet, it's integral to what I do. I also believe that, as Shamu pointed out, that the evolution of the meal, we're all familiar with what an aquifer and watersheds are, but food has a food shed. And how food moves through a culture is really something that I think about often. I kind of like to know where things come from. And then I like to know, well, what made that grow? And who grew it? And, oh, wow, this is really cool. This is from Connecticut. And whether I'm talking to, we have programs at our farm where school kids come. And I have some of the richest kids in America and some of the poorest kids in America come each spring and each fall. The one thing they have in common is that they're clueless about how food is grown.
Yeah.
And I have this paper bag game where I pull out groceries, in this case vegetables and fruit, and I ask what can grow in Connecticut and what can't. And it doesn't matter whether they live in a triplex on Park or in an inner city of Bridgeport, bananas don't grow in Waldingfield. And they think that maybe they do. So the educational component is probably the most central tenet of how I look at eating with a client or with a friend, is that, God, they grow great asparagus here. Really, they do? Yeah, you should go check it out. So I just look for the opportunity to turn them onto a food experience. And as a person who has my mother-in-law is a minister, a Presbyterian minister, and she's always giving thanks. And she's on the phone, I love the fact that you grow It's all over the Bible, you should check this out. Okay, thank you, Shirley, I appreciate that. But you know what, I'm getting older and I really do I get it. I didn't get it when I was 20. I thought it was a fun thing to do, but now it has a much more, for lack of a better word, it has a more spiritual intake to me. I don't impress that upon other people, I impress the educational aspect of it. But so my table is hopefully about learning about food.
As you know, we're going to pull this particular conversation to a close, is that one of the overarching themes that seem to be coming through is know the source and then trust the food. So thank you very much for sharing all of that with us.